Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Cynthia Walker. I'm the director here at the Brickstore Museum, and I'm very sorry not to be there in person with you today, but I want to thank Art and Tim for inviting me to share a few words with you about how archaeology fits into the museum's mission and our operations. I'll begin by saying that I am not an archaeologist, though will fully admit that my favorite movie as a kid, and in fact it still is my ringtone on my cell phone, was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, though obviously I related more to Dr. Jones's quote, "That belongs in a museum," than I did to his adventuring across landscapes riddled with peril. That fanciful introduction to how archaeology and museums go hand in hand, and that's to say, not much of an introduction at all. My path took me more toward history and museum management instead of fieldwork. And now, after more than a decade here at the Brickstore Museum, I've come to deeply appreciate the close, mutually supportive relationship that archaeology and museums have, especially at the local and regional level. I think sometimes the public hears the words archaeology and museums together in the same sentence and think of places like the British Museum, which arguably should return the majority of its collections to their rightful cultures. It's in this generalized disappointment with massive history institutions where I think local museums and regional archaeology collaborations can really shine. To understand what drives our work here, I just want to take a step back and look at in 2022, the museum created an exhibit that inspected our own collecting past. The concept of American museums held roots in a European precedent, so collecting objects worthy of study, which is questionable now, by the elite class who could afford to spend the time doing so. This means that museums developed through a colonial mindset and a perspective of the majority community that most often ignored or sometimes misunderstood the stories of Black and Indigenous peoples when creating a national origin story. As time went on, museums, sometimes intentionally and sometimes not, devalued certain cultures to elevate others, usually those of Euro-American white communities. That's why if you close your eyes and think of what you might see walking through any New England town's local history museum or historical society, and probably nationally for that matter, you'll likely see portraits of town founders, typically white wealthy men, surrounded by their belongings and their stories. Often their historic homes are still standing, their furniture, artwork, diaries, other life mementos are all saved to tell their stories in 3 dimensions. Meanwhile, the histories of others were pushed aside or reduced to stereotypes. New England states have rich histories of Indigenous peoples going back thousands of years, as you all know, and strong links to the Southern slave trade. And yet, New England has the most museums per capita in the nation. So where is all of that information? Up until now, museums have really struggled, and probably you might acknowledge that they continue to struggle to include these underrepresented communities. But there is strength in small history organizations being able to be the outlets of archaeological data and information. Often the museum's base collection started as items from its founders or early supporters' own private collections, which really were their family histories, generally stemming from the 17th to 19th centuries. And what results now is that many local history museums, as I was just talking about, have a great percentage of their collections focusing on those centuries only, but not much else. We are literally missing gigantic swaths of history across New England and the nation, and here in Maine, and the blind spots have now become quite obvious. So as an organization that collects and interprets stories, we understand that while some barriers to inclusion have fallen, others remain, and they're often more subtle and even subconscious. Systemic biases of race and gender and identity are not the fault of any one person, and they're obviously the result of various frameworks that oppressed peoples over time. And the very act of collecting carries political, ideological, aesthetic, and other biases that each of us have. Decisions made by professionals and volunteers over the Brickstore Museum's history, any museum, but ours included, over a museum's long history are rooted in education, upbringing, prejudices, and everything else combined. So we really all must consider how our perspectives frame history, and at a museum, how underlying biases can construct local lore. As trusted stewards of history, we must recognize that our words, our exhibits, and collections shape public understanding. And it may surprise some, but not everyone feels welcome in our shared history museum. So we carry a heavy responsibility to look honestly at the past and be active partners in creating equitable and inclusive futures. When people and institutions act in ways that exclude others, even unknowingly, the entire community loses. And that's really the value that we work year-round trying to repair here at the Brickstore Museum. And it's why we're committed to broadening our historical narrative and inviting the community to help fill those gaps. And that's where archaeology plays such a vital role. Even though we live in a town with a Wabanaki name, Kennebunk, derived allegedly from an Abenaki word for long water place, our local histories have seldom acknowledged the indigenous story that came before us. Archaeology helps us uncover those deeper layers of our shared past that obviously never made it into the written record. Here in Kennebunk, archaeological work has been ongoing for decades, as you may know better than me, but a major step forward came in 2017 when the creation of the Cape Porpoise Archaeological Alliance between the Brickstore Museum, Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, and local archaeologists led by Tim Spar. This collaboration has become a cornerstone of our mission to preserve and interpret the full scope of Kennebunk's cultural heritage. Archaeology provides valuable insights to that past that we're missing, just like the documents, photographs, and artifacts in our archives. But these stories first require, obviously, a dig to unearth them. The museum serves as a repository for artifacts discovered during regional archaeological investigations, and we share these findings through exhibitions, educational programs, and online resources like the Southern Maine Archaeology Resource, a digital learning tool that explores how archaeology helps us understand this history. Through this collaboration, we are able to produce public programming, one that includes I think 2 or 3 year now annual archaeology forum, thanks to Tim, where we strive to bring those stories forward. So we love to welcome archaeologists and the public to share current research and engage in conversation about the work that is being done to uncover further histories. In many ways, we see the museum as the educational arm of the region's archaeology work. And it's so important that the public joins us on this journey of rediscovery now that we recognize what has been missing. Here at the modern Brickstore Museum, we work by acknowledging 2 essential truths. First, there is a difference between American mythology, which is collecting for nostalgia, and American history, which is collecting for truth. True history shows us the full story with its triumphs and mistakes alike, so we all can learn and grow. Second, we constantly ask, who is telling the story? Is one person prioritized over another? Who is missing? And whose artifacts and perspectives are shaping our understanding? We cannot fix these issues with words alone, which is why walking the walk to purposely host the Cape Porpoise archaeology offices here on site, planning for further archaeology repository and workspace, and working towards greater capacity for the archaeology team is a priority as the museum plans our own next stages of growth. After 90 years in the same historic buildings on this campus, we are now planning for the largest expansion of museum spaces and services to be undertaken over the next 10 years, And we really look forward to having public engagement with history right here at the core of our mission. And in the 21st century, this means not only conserving the 55,000 objects that we have here in the museum's collections behind me, but also proactively supporting archaeological work in the field to further illustrate our region's story. I really want to thank you all for being here and allowing me to share a message with you today. And hopefully, this might give you a couple ideas as you go back out into the field to be looking for those regional history, local history museums and historical societies that are probably really in need of your help to help illustrate those earlier stories, as I was mentioning, and would be very happy to partner with you on projects like this. So thank you once again for having me, and I'll see you soon.